Hello, and welcome to Coffee Time with Abgadeas. This is the show where you just might see me take a sip out of this coffee that is once again water today. Already had too much coffee for the day, but more or less, I'm just here to rant and rave about anything and everything that interests me. So for today's video, I'm currently kind of preparing several more in-depth videos that I want to do a bit more research, make sure I have all my facts straight, and make sure I have as much information as possible going in. So today I kind of wanted to return to a tech-related topic and one that I can kind of just rant on about a little bit here. So today I kind of wanted to just give a rant about Apple in general. So for a bit of background, at least on myself, if you haven't seen my previous tech videos, I come from a background of doing mainly cell phone repair. I did a bit of like laptop and desktop repair, and I've done stuff for myself, but mainly my background is cell phone repair. And through that, I saw all kinds of devices: iPhones, Samsungs, LG at the time, Nexus when it existed, that eventually turned into the Pixel devices. I saw Sony's, Huawei's, Motorola, basically any phone that is sold and used in Canada, I saw it come across my tech bench. And I've always kind of held the opinion that Apple's ecosystem is very nice. It works very well together. The way things like iMessage integrate across from iPhone to Mac, I think is pretty seamless and offers a really good user experience for the end user. But with that being said, I guess before starting my rant, I should give a bit of a history here. I alluded to this in my previous video, I believe on my OnePlus video, but so before the USB-C port was kind of universally introduced and implemented into Android phones, vapes, the Nintendo Switch, audio interfaces, basically anything that uses a USB cable, before all those devices switched to USB-C, you had a plethora of different kinds of USB: micro USB, USB-A, USB-B. You had USB micro B, you had different versions, and it was generally chaos. So Apple kind of made this very innovative move. It was fairly anti-consumer at the time, and it did piss a lot of people off, but I believe around 2012, maybe around 2013, 2014, I might have my years slightly off there, but they released a MacBook that introduced this new USB-C charger. So this seems like, in retrospect, that this is the logical step, that it makes sense to go towards one universal charging port that can transfer data and charge a multitude of devices. But the way Apple saw fit to do this is by taking away every single other port on their MacBook. So instead of just putting in, say, one USB-C port, two USB-C ports, leaving the rest, they took away all their ports and implemented just USB-C. At the time, not a lot of USB-C accessories existed. Several dongles, as they're called, were engineered and manufactured specifically for these MacBook models. And it generally pissed a lot of people off at the time. But like I say, in retrospect, seeing now that mobile phones, game consoles, audio interfaces, so many devices use USB-C, it seems like it was the right move. So, I think there's a bit of debate to be had on that, but the interesting part about that is some 10 years later, maybe a little less, depending on how accurate my timeframes are here, but 10 years later, the iPhone 14, even the iPhone 14 Pro, is limited to lightning charging. And you say, oh, well, what's the big deal there? It's just another charging cable. I don't see the big deal. Lightning is still on USB 2 speeds. USB 3 has been out maybe for a decade now, and Lightning is stuck on USB 2 speeds. So that means if you want to follow Apple's advertising and film something on your iPhone. But you don't want to edit that video on the tiny little 6-inch or 5-inch screen you have, so you want to transfer it to your Mac Studio Pro. You want to take your Pro phone, that is for professionals, and transfer the files onto your Pro Mac, that is for professionals. Issue is you're going to be doing that at the same speed that people were doing it 10 years ago. Despite your $2,000 phone and your $10,000 Mac that you just took home from the Apple Store, you're stuck using speeds that are from 10 years ago. The alternative to this that Apple kind of pushes is their AirDrop, so wireless file transfer. And I haven't used it myself, so I can't tell you how fast it is or how good it is. It definitely does not operate at the speeds that USB 3 or USB 3.1 actually operate at. So no matter what you do, if you're in the Apple ecosystem, your data transfer rates were stuck 10, 15 years in the past. So Apple now is in a position where they're looking at implementing USB-C into their phones. And you ask, oh, what made them change their mind? Did they have an honest assessment of the market, of users' reactions and users' needs, and acted accordingly? No, they did not. The European Union put forward a regulation, I'm going to be very deliberate with the wording and pay attention here. A regulation that any device that can charge with a cable must charge with a USB-C cable. I'm sure I'm missing an adjective or two, a descriptive word, but notice that this legislation specifically says if it can charge with a cable, it has to be USB-C. The EU regulators, I think, left this or put this in there to account for things like AirPods, wireless headphones, smartwatches, things that actually introducing a USB-C port into would hinder their overall development and engineering, and in general would make the device less user-friendly. But you can see with this wording that if the next iPhone, the iPhone 15, simply wasn't able to be charged with a cable, well, they wouldn't need USB-C. So they effectively could take out the charging port entirely and just leave in wireless charging and wireless file transfer. And I'm not exactly sure where wireless charging is, but the last time I checked in on it, it was at about 15 watts, maybe 20 watts, maybe it's even gotten up to 30 watts. But that's coming into a market where you have Android devices that can charge up to 120 watts. Android devices that you can plug in at 1% and within 5 minutes be up to 50% on the device. Sure, iPhone users don't mind. They like charging their device in all night, and they like worrying that they're halfway through the day, so they need to find an Apple-specific charger to charge their device because now it's down to 10%, right? I'm sure Apple users don't mind that at all. But it's kind of up in the air what Apple's actually going to do with their next phone. And one of the other things, the main reason Apple stuck to Lightning, it wasn't just because they didn't want to put in the research and development time or because they wanted to give a big FU to their users. The reason they are sticking to Lightning is because their certification process around Lightning cables. So generally, in order for any cable to function, it needs a chipset on the actual cable itself, usually right at the end where it plugs in. And Apple has made it so that in order to have a charging cable that you can just plug into an iPhone and it charges normally with no notification or anything, you need to contact Apple, have them certify the cable, and then you have to pay them a certain percentage royalty on each and every cable you sell. If you don't do that, the cable will work fine, But when the user goes to use the cable, they'll get a big notification saying, this isn't certified to use with iPhone, you shouldn't be using it, it could damage your device. A cable that could be the exact same make, could have the exact same physical materials as another cable that was Apple certified. The exact same cables, one's certified and one's not. The one that's certified won't get the message. The one that's not certified will get the message. So basically, for all your cables that aren't your gas station dollar special cables, they go out and get this certification so that people will continue to buy their cables and that they'll work fine. So, while it's kind of up in the air what Apple is actually going to do with their USB-C, or if they're just going to switch to wireless, we now have this article coming out of Mac Rumors, which it is a rumor, right? It's a rumor mill, so we don't take anything like this too seriously, but it also wouldn't surprise me if this was the case. Basically, what this article is saying is that same certification, that same artificial barrier Apple has around manufacturing lightning cables, they want to bring that to USB cables. So that means you can have your fancy $20, $30, $50 USB-C cable that works fine with your laptop that needs 100 watts of charging. It works fine with your Nintendo Switch. It works fine with your phone. It works fine with your vape. It works fine with any other device you plug into it. But the moment you plug into your iPhone, you essentially get a DEFCON 5 message. This cable is going to destroy your phone. How dare you use something that the manufacturer didn't pay Apple for? Remove it immediately. That's not what it says, but that's generally the vibe you get. This is the same kind of instance in the repair industry where you had, most of the time, the same factories that actually manufactured the components for Apple. So they manufactured the screen for Apple, but then they still have a contract and an ability. I don't know, this might be in a bit of a legal gray zone, but they can continue to manufacture those same screens, that same spec, with all those exact same materials as they did for Apple. But because Apple puts a special little serial number and a special little verification process in all their devices, that factory could send you the exact same screen that they would send to the factory that assembles an iPhone. So you could get the exact same screen that is already on your iPhone. But because it doesn't have that serial number, auto brightness doesn't work, True Tone doesn't work, and you get a big notification that you're not using an Apple certified screen, and you get a big permanent notification in the settings. So despite the fact that you repaired the device properly, you most likely paid more money to get the actual proper quality screen, because there's not a serial number programmed in there, it is going to have that message. And guess what? Unless you are Apple, or you rent Apple's equipment and pay them basically the same amount of money that you would pay them to repair it anyways, unless you're Apple or you do that process, no matter what screen you purchase, even if it is directly from Apple, it will not have True Tone, and that notification will not go away. So it's just Apple's way of asserting their control and their dominance over everything. You can watch, mentioned him before, but Louis Rossman is probably one of the best sources on this, because he's run a micro soldering repair shop, so dealing with the little nitty gritty issues, very specific IC chips, weird issues coming out of Macs. He mainly focuses on Apple devices, but you can kind of see throughout his videos the amount of stuff Apple does to make life more difficult for the consumer is absolutely ridiculous. For example, I'm going to miss out on a couple of the details here, but I think I remember this well enough to give you the gist of it. So there was a specific MacBook that had a very clear failure. If I recall, it was the backlight, so the light behind your keyboard that lights it all up. And it turns out this specific component would fail. And As this component was on a larger rail that was actually required to deliver power to the machine itself, again, I might be having a bit of the details mixed up here, but basically, it made it so when that backlight chip crapped out, the entire computer wouldn't function. So instead of just not having a light up keyboard, you now have a non functioning computer. If you brought this to Apple after their 1 year warranty, they would say, "Ah, that sucks. Probably shouldn't have broke it. Buy a new one." That's it. Despite the fact that it was most likely an engineering failure, as this particular component failed on a number of that model of Macs, Apple refused to actually do anything or acknowledge it. Okay, that's fine. That's fine. Apple doesn't have to service products out of warranty. There's no kind of precedent for that anywhere. So no big deal. You can go to Louis Rossman's shop and get it repaired. Okay. Louis Rossman can get that chip out of the factory in China that manufactured it for Apple. He could probably buy it for 50 cents, maybe $2, charge you $200 of labor, right? Apple gets in the middle of that and says, no, 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 no. You are not allowed to sell these little chips, these little components that are somewhat generic, Apple specific in certain ways, but any manufacturer that deals with this kind of manufacturing could most certainly manufacture them if they had the schematics. Apple gets in the way and says, nope, 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 you can't sell that. We need that user to buy a new MacBook, please. You're not allowed to do your $200, $300, $400 repair to repair this $2,500, $3,000 machine. No, 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 no. This person needs to buy a new machine. So I've kind of been going back and forth for a while. If you watch my OnePlus video, I'm up in the air about what my next phone is going to be. I'm probably going to ride this thing into the grave, especially with more and more behavior like this coming out of Apple. I was kind of in this vague middle ground where if the iPhone 15 implemented USB-C, I might just switch to it. Mainly for the increased quality with social media apps. Excuse me. Mainly for stuff like TikTok. The main issue there is software developers, the people that actually develop these social media apps. They actually have to develop video encoders and decoders. So when they're taking a video file from a device, the app knows actually how to read it and display it. For iPhones, you generally have 3, maybe 4 models a year, and a couple of those use the same camera modules, the same image processing. So it's relatively simple to make a decoding process that is going to work perfectly for all 4 of those models. This is a much different situation when you're talking about Android phones and you're talking about hundreds of variants being released a year, let alone what the back catalog is of available Android devices. So as a result, when you film a TikTok, a Snapchat, Instagram video on an Android device, it will suffer in quality. The decoder typically doesn't know how to handle it as well, and you're going to run into either pixelation, screen tearing, you may run into like white balance issues. So in general, specifically because they're so popular and Apple releases so few models, if you are producing social media content, especially portrait mode, TikTok, YouTube Shorts style content, it's all but a necessity to have an iPhone. And with this, even given that fact, I am still so torn on whether or not to go with an iPhone. Even if they do implement USB-C, and even if they don't put these same certification limitations on it, I think I would still be pretty hesitant to get an iPhone. The more and more I hear about what Apple's trying to do to their consumers and what they have done over the past decade, it's a very difficult call for me to make and for me to switch over to Apple. I don't think I use Windows everything. The Windows Phone app is caught up and surpassed, I would say, the iPhone to Mac integration. So really the only reason I would be switching is for that increased quality. I don't like their UI. I don't like their operating system as much. I don't mind it. I can use it. I would definitely get used to it, but I definitely prefer Windows and Android UIs. But yeah, that is basically my rant on Apple. Sorry, I didn't have a lot of sources. I didn't have a lot of specifics today. I will try to dig up the Lewis Rossman video, specifically talking about that backlight chip issue, and I'll post the article I showed, but more or less today was just an unorganized rant, so I can get back to preparing for my more intense videos. And yeah, I think that's about it for today. As I mentioned before, I may or may not keep up doing this daily. I may switch to doing it every second day, so just as a fair warning. If you have, or maybe even every few days, but I'm going to continue to make consistent content. I just need to find a pace that works best for me. I still work a almost full-time job, and I'm planning on filming at least weekly a show with Dylan Daniels over at entitled Millennials, which reminds me, my program with him went live today. So I will have that link down in the description. If you have any recommendations of topics for me to cover, or anything you want me to take a look into, do a bit of research on, prepare a video for, please do let me know down below or in a personal message if you have me on any social media platform. Again, thank you so much for watching. Thank you to the 56 people that remain subscribed to me. I lost a subscriber, but then I gained one back. So we are back to square one with that. Still getting about 20, maybe 30 views per video. I definitely appreciate it. Everybody who continues to tune in, and even the people that only tune in once or twice. Again, thank you so much for watching, and you have a gooder.